Welcome everyone in today's lunch talk. Just gonna give people the time to join before we start our talk. So I will already give a short introduction. So hello everyone, my name is Annelies van Dijk. I am the project manager of the SciComm Academy at SciMingo. And SciMingo is a Flemish nonprofit organization based here in Brussels, in Belgium. And we want to help researchers to reach a broader audience with their research. And we do this with our various projects. We have the Flemish Thesis Award, the Flemish PhD Cup, which is actually a contest for freshly graduated doctors to present their research in only a few minutes. And this week, actually tomorrow, we have the final of our PhD Cup. So I invite you all to join us in Ghent if you're in Belgium, or join us live via the live stream. And I will share the link to this in the chat later on. With our last project, the SciComm Academy, we host in-person workshops where we want to help people to give you the tools to reach a broader audience. For example, help you to create an infographic, a short presentation, or even a video about your research that you can share. And another side project of this SciComm Academy is our free online lunch talks, like the one of today, where we invite various experts or science communicators to tell us more about their topic related to science communication. And for our talk of today, we invited Anouk De Ridder, and I will shortly introduce her in a minute. But first, I want to also make a little promotion for our next talk, which will be on November 14th, where Seppe van Blijder will discuss his research on discrimination and bias in science communication, because we do not realize enough that even in SciComm, some voices are underrepresented, undervalued, or not taken seriously despite their expertise. So more information about this lunch talk will also be included in the follow-up mail or in our newsletters, for which you can register also later on. So with that being said, in today's lunch talk, we have Anouk with us, and she will tackle some of the most common hurdles and challenges of getting started in science communication, doing your PhD research. And she will also share some tips on project management as well. And before I give the floor to her, I want to encourage you, as always, to ask your questions to Anouk in the chat or in the Q&A window, and we will try to tackle them as we go. And with that being said, I will give the floor to Anouk, and I wish you all a very inspiring and motivating talk.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us during this lunch talk. Let's see, sharing my screen. After 4 years, we're finally used to doing this. All right, let's go. So today I want to talk to you about overcoming those hurdles. And what I brought for you today as some fun side dishes for your lunch, we have on the menu the buts, the 3 hurdles to starting science communication and how not to let them stop you. And then some very light project management, just 2 tools to help you get started so that after we're done today, you really feel that you left this lunch with something very concrete to do. Like, you know, if I take this, if I answer these questions, if I use this tool, I'll have something to get me going, and I know where to get started. So what I hope by the end of this talk is that you will have a full tummy and that these 2 goals will have been met. I want to leave you with some tactics and some useful approaches to overcoming common hurdles. And I want to give you a concrete idea of where and how to get started. And I really want to ask you, if by the end of this talk you feel like we didn't do that, to really just reach out to me and let me know. That means I can improve something. That means I have to change something. And that is totally fine. I really want to hear that. So if you feel by the end of this, I just still don't know how to get started with this, I don't know what I could do, that's no problem. That is a little bit sad, but then we can improve upon that. So don't hesitate to let us know. I told you what I'm going to talk about today. I told you what we're trying to hope to achieve today, but who am I and why am I a good person to talk to you about this? I am Anouk De Ridder. I am a research project manager currently at IO, and I'm on assignment with our public employment service right now. which means that they are my clients and I help them set up and organize research for different purposes. I have a PhD myself in communication sciences. Already 2 years ago, I defended it. It's at the University of Antwerp. I had a wonderful time during my PhD. And after completing it, I stayed on for a while at the University of Antwerp, but also joined KDG, University of Applied Sciences and Arts, as a science communication expert. So I helped them set up some science communication initiatives mostly and did some research on the side. In that same year where I defended my PhD, I also wrote the book, Not That Kind of Doctor, which is like a very fast hand guide to people who may be considering doing a PhD, who might be getting started with their PhD. And that also included a very large chapter on science communication that our publisher actually asked me to cut down to half, because I went so overboard talking about science communication that she said, this is great, it is a book on its own, but you cannot include it all here. So this is why I started giving these talks, because I have more to say. And now let's get to the actual content of our talk today. I really want to, but while I was writing our chapter on science communication, I heard from a lot of PhD students that while they may have had an idea of what they wanted to do, like, oh, I see that writing blogs or news articles or doing a vlog could be useful, they could see why they had to do it or why it would be fun or what it could add to them, but they didn't really know how to get started with it, or felt like they were being stopped somehow. So we addressed 3 major hurdles and then listened around with other experts from fellow PhDs, postdocs, supervisors on how they overcame those hurdles. So this is what I want to share with you today. The first hurdle that I heard a lot about was, I just have nothing to share. This is something that you often hear from first-year PhD students specifically, but it's not limited to that group alone. It's the idea of course, scientists should share their research, their publications, their outcomes, their results, but I don't have any yet. I barely know what I'm going to be researching for the following 4 to 6 years. So this is where I want to open your perspective a little bit and give you some ideas of what you could be sharing, even if you're only getting your feet wet, even when you're before or starting your PhD. I believe that you do have a lot to share. First of all, there's your plans. What will you be researching, or what are you hoping to research? What is the current state of the art, and what gap are you hoping to address within that state of the art? What methods will you be using, and why are they suitable? Are you maybe developing something new? I know that not all PhD students will feel comfortable doing this, because I also know that we are often quite insecure about our plans, and it may not be set in stone, and maybe my supervisor hasn't given me permission yet, or we haven't even agreed upon what we will be doing. But it could be a good idea to combine this approach with other elements that I'm going to be sharing here, which is share your journey. The entire journey of trying to figure out what your PhD is going to be about, what are the research questions you want to answer, what are you contributing to, what methods are you going to be using. That process is so interesting and can teach people so much about the scientific method. And it's actually valuable to give your perspective on how you're going through that journey, even saying like, oh, remember half a year ago, I shared my plans and now I'm changing them because that is part of my journey as a PhD student. That is something that could help you get started as a science communicator. It's just beginning somewhere with communication. Then, of course, there's talking about the work of others in your area of expertise. Maybe you don't have a new publication to share yet, and that is completely okay. But you are probably following the work of others in the beginning, or trying to figure it out, and you're reading a lot. So why not challenge yourself like, oh, once a month, I'm going to create some content about something that I'm reading, a work that I keep on referring back to, for example. And you can share about them as well. As long as you're not claiming that work as your own work, It is perfectly fine to be doing this, even encouraged. And just imagine yourself as a supervisor, as a professor in 20 years, and you see others creating content about the research work that you just published. That would be amazing. So maybe you can even use it as a way to reach out to them, as a tool for networking. So that is also something you could be doing. Then, of course, there's asking for input on your work. Depending on a platform where you will be sharing about your work, it could be valuable to say like, okay, this is a plan that I'm sharing. This is where it is in my journey that I'm looking at this, but does anyone want to give me feedback? Does anyone want to critique this? What do you think about this perspective? What will you be working on? So this is also something that you could maybe consider. And then alongside all of this is, of course, explaining the scientific process is something you can talk about, some already related to what I was saying before, showing the fact that we don't just sit at our desk, say, I'm going to answer question A, and then 4 years later provide answer Z. That's not how this works. And explaining a bit more about that, educating people on that can also be very valuable. And finally, there's always giving your perspective on relevant work or current events. This is something that I've noticed that people start to become more comfortable with more towards the end of the PhD, because they feel more like experts on their subject matter. But I don't think you have to wait that long, actually. I know you feel like you have more to add by then, but as long you can challenge yourself to be doing that in a smaller space, maybe on Threads, maybe on LinkedIn, maybe on Instagram, wherever you feel comfortable starting. If you see something that is related to your area of expertise or what you're working on, applying your own perspective to that current event can always be valuable and something for you to help you get started. A second hurdle I've heard a lot, sadly, was, well, my supervisor just won't let me engage in science communication. This is something that you hear specifically when it's about entering, for example, large, wonderful competitions for science communication, where you can learn so much, but they do take up quite some time if you want to do well, and that's normal. But then having a supervisor tell you they would rather have you not engage, well, that's always very disappointing. So let's talk a little bit about what tools you can use to actually convince them that it is a great idea for you to participate in that type of stuff. And to do that, we have to go meta and communicate about communicating. Because as always, this is outside the scope of our talk today, but as always, if you have a problem with your supervisor, communication is the only answer, really, or at least the first answer. And the first thing that I want to encourage you to do is to speak their language and empathize with their perspective. It's mostly about figuring out what they care about. And here I cannot give you a one-size-fits-all answer, because every professor has another major element that they are striving towards. Some want more attention for their own work, and they will try to encourage you to create that visibility for the research, for the project, for the department, for the faculty, for the entire university. That depends on where you're at. But if they already have that as a priority, then you probably can use that in your advantage to encourage them to let you engage in science communication. But others are just really, really focused on having happy PhD students. And then your perspective would be, well, this would make me very happy. There's definitely a link to job satisfaction and successful results, successful outcomes on the research as well. So that would be something to appeal to when you're trying to convince them. And others care about publications, about the results, about the science of it all. And of course, that's a very valid priority to have. But then maybe you could get started with something more in line with more classical science communication. Maybe you earn your stripes doing great presentations at conferences first, or write articles about that. And that's the way you can get your feet wet and empathize with them, and then really listen to their priorities and see where you can find connections there. Another thing when I talk about empathizing with them is think of their concerns. What is it that is really making them say no to you? Sometimes this could be that they're concerned about you sharing certain information publicly, but it could also be a concern about protecting you from unfounded criticism. It could be that your supervisor themselves had a bad experience. For example, maybe they talked to a journalist and the article didn't turn out the way they wanted. I know that is not something, I'm really not pointing any fingers at journalists here, because I know that they do wonderful work, but maybe one bad experience changed their perspective on it. And that is, again, if you empathize and if you talk to them, that might be something you can figure out together, and maybe you find a different solution to getting started. Starting early can help here, because it can help you show to them that you can fit it into your work. If you start early and you still manage to get your research work done, your teaching, you know, all of that, if you show that you can combine all those different things, then it will just be a part of how you work alongside with them, and that could help you there. And then there's always, for the very, very stubborn professors, using the PhD format. Within Flemish universities, we have a great array of offering of like courses you can take, trainings you can take. So if you can link it to that, like, oh, I have to do it to get my training done, then that could be a first way. And then you'll always have some practical experience within those courses as well. But I don't have to convince you of that, because you're here, so you very clearly see the added value of engaging with these types of content. And then by the end of this, you will be sick of hearing me say this, but plan, plan, plan. Supervisors love plans. They love knowing that you thought about it, that you're not just going to be willy-nilly tweeting away about everything you read. So by making a plan, not only of what you will be sharing, but also when you will be sharing it and when you will be working on it, and showing that you do have the time for it, you might be able to convince them as well. You can explain to them the necessity and show the added value, but I'm not going to extend on that right now, because by the end of this presentation, I have a bit more information on how you can show the added value of engaging in science communication specifically. That brings us to our third hurdle for the day. It's, I just don't have the time. So while I was talking about taking courses and planning, and you should be engaging in this, well, you could be very well listening to me and saying, that's all very fun, but I have research to do, I have teaching to do. So let's talk about the time hurdle. I'm going to be very annoying here and say that you can optimize the time you have. And we're going to be very clever about this and think of quick wins. What I mean by quick wins is that you won't be engaging at first in something that will take up an entire week or an entire good parts of a month to work on, but rather, okay, so if we're talking about communicating, what do I already do? Do you already post on LinkedIn quite often? Do you like to make reels? Are you on TikTok a lot? Where are you already, and what feels comfortable for you? And where do you feel comfortable starting to incorporate some of the things that we talked about earlier, whether it's your own research, others' research, responding to current events? Really think of how you can be doing that. Set yourself a fun challenge. Maybe you want to post on Threads or a reel every day. And you think, well, if I spend 1 minute crafting something every day, at least I'm getting my feet wet. It's something quick. It won't take up everything. But that is a first way to start with this. But then, like I said, plan, plan, plan. But keeping in mind that done is the first step to done well. Overcoming that threshold of just getting started with it will be such a major one that improving your science communication efforts will follow naturally. If you're engaging with something and you're interested in it and you want to learn from something, after a while, you'll start to figure out what content can teach you more. You'll want to pick up trainings. So just getting started with it is the first step to becoming good at it. I also talked to a postdoc researcher, and she told me that during her PhD, she actually had a deal with her supervisor that every, I think, third Monday of the month was her SciComm day. And during that day, she would be doing no research, no teaching, no whatever, no emails. She was only thinking about, what do I have? Communication, what is already something that is coming up? Do I have a presentation plan? Should I be working on that? If she had nothing planned, she would strategically think about, okay, by then I'll have some new research out, or I'll have something new to share. Or if she didn't have anything, she would dive into the research that she was looking at that time and come up with a blog post about something. So, you know, like there was one day, 8 hours every month, that she dedicated herself to thinking about that. And that was just a deal that they had and something they agreed upon. And she said that she really liked working within that format. And then, like I said, there's optimizing the use of our time. And here I really, my boss maybe won't like me saying this, but play it safe. Sometimes just getting started is the first step. And then you can get going from there. But also be practical. Think of creating a style guide for yourself. And if you're not really into that, use the style guide of the university. There's always so many tools already still available for you to use. So if you're going to be giving a presentation and you're not really into the whole visual aspect, make use of that. If you don't feel comfortable crafting, if you want to write, but you hate writing a blank page, I mean, there are a lot of tools out there to write a first draft that you can then improve or use as a framework to start writing within. So really think of what you can reuse. I personally, throughout my PhD, had a color scheme and a font that I just said, this is the style guide of my PhD. And every time I had to make a presentation, I would just reuse that again. So at least that way of thinking about it was already out the door. I did that once, and that allowed me to recreate very quickly. And then I have the fourth hurdle, and there I'm gonna share 2 tools, but I just want to quickly check in if there's already any questions that came. No, okay, just drop them in the chat and then I'll ask again later. But let's see how we can overcome.
Maybe some people could, do you have some places where you know that people could take their first steps, like good output resources? I know it's the EOS Wetenschap is always looking for people to write a blog about their research for their website, but if you know some tools that could help for the people that are following, that would be really nice as well.
Let me think. I think honestly, the first thing I think about is listen within your university, within the department, within the faculty, if they need someone to host their LinkedIn page, for example, and just explain to them, like, this is something I'm very interested in. I want to learn more about that. That would also address the need of, like, I have nothing to share. Everything that have to be shared will be brought to you. So that is something you can do.
I think also I might add up on that. Every university is normally taking part in the National Day of Science. So look there, or for the Children's University, that's the first step, because you will be working in a team. It's about the general research at your lab. So it's a smaller step because you don't have to engage in your own research just yet. And then you can always, of course, look for network events. For example, there's the Belgium SciComm, the BE SciComm community that always hosts nice events where people get together that want to engage in science communication or are already doing so, to really help you going. So I can also share some resources in the follow-up mail. And while we were talking, another question came up, actually. Someone is asking how you would deal with researchers that are looking down on science communication.
Ooh, I think honestly, the last tool so I have 2 tools after this, and the last one is really about showing the added value of doing science communication. So I hope that might answer that question a little bit. But if it doesn't, let's come back to this and talk about that more, because my gut instinct is like, how can you look down on it? But of course, if that is something that you're experiencing, then let's really talk about that. And I think, yeah, really it's going to be about showing the added value of it, what it can bring, and speaking their language again. So let's see if we can pick up on that later.
I can maybe also share my personal experience, because I used to be a PhD researcher in a previous life as well. I think there might always be people that will have something to say about what you're sharing, whether it's not completely correct or whether you should be spending your time. So I would try to block out those people as much as possible and see indeed the added value for yourself or for the people that you want to reach, because they will see it as very valuable that you are sharing what you're doing.
Yeah, that is also, there's talking about and explaining, but if someone is just not willing to listen to even all the great arguments and the value that you're showing of it, and even the results that you will get from that, then after a while it's just focusing on what you're doing with the people who are supportive. Of course, there's no reason to keep engaging with negativity. That won't bring us anywhere. So if it's okay, I'm going to continue, but please keep asking your questions. We'll certainly come back to them. So where to begin? I'm going to give you two tools. The first is a quick worksheet to launch your next SciComm project. And the second will be about showing the added value of spending time on science communication. But I just want to, if you already have a SciComm challenge before you right now, and that could be anything, I'm going to include here, that could be a presentation at a conference, so it could be for other researchers, it could be for the general public. If you want to make something up, say, I want to think about publishing a press release when I have my next publication, for example, because I think it could be interesting for a general audience, write it down now. Because I think it's always more fun if we're looking at these types of tools that you can start thinking about, how would I apply that to what I'm working on right now? So really make it relevant for yourself as we're going along. If you don't have anything, don't worry. Maybe the challenge you're working on is trying to figure out what you want to do. That is totally okay. So how could you get started? The first one, I'm just going to talk a little bit more general and some additional quick tips before we get to the worksheet. And I think a very fun first thing to think about for yourself is, what are you good at? What are your strengths? Are you a good writer? Are you a good public speaker? Do you have some experience with podcasting or with vlogging? Is that something you want to think about? Are you good at having conversation with others? Being a great interviewer is an amazing skill to have, whether you do that on video, in audio, or written. So identify what you feel you are good at. And if you don't know, ask the people around you, because they will have an answer for you. You're always good at something in communication. I promise you. And that will come up as soon as you start talking about it with others. So identify what you're already good at, because that might, help you build that confidence a little bit, feeling like, oh, this is something that I'm already good at, and I'm honing my skill here, my craft. That could be really fun for you. And then as you're getting more experienced, you can start stretching a little bit and really start thinking about, okay, I'm going to start challenging myself. I'm not just going to be doing audio. I'm going to also record it on video or I did writing and I wrote it out for myself, but now I want to start writing down interviews I had with other researchers. So maybe that's something to think about as well. Then there's, of course, following training. If you are truly lost, or if you feel that your skill does need a lot of work still, which is honestly super normal. And the moment you stop thinking that you can improve, that's where the problems are. So always keep engaging in training. The PhDs in Belgium have a great format to engage in training. So make use of that. I'm not going to talk about that for too long, because you're here, so you do see the value of training. And then, of course, there's asking for help. The science communication community is so incredibly open and helpful. And I promise you that even when you're looking at someone's content and you think, oh, they're way too advanced, they probably don't want to engage with me, you can always send them a message on LinkedIn, for example, and reach out to them. And I'm going to very specifically refer you to someone who has also given a talk on SciMingo before, which is Dr. Ben Verhoeven. He has a format called Bespreek het met Ben, and he will give you 20 minutes of free science communication advice. If you look him up on LinkedIn, you can just plan a meeting with him, present your challenge to him, and that's a professional science communicator at the ready for you to start tackling your challenge specifically. So that is one of the examples that I just want to give you about how open this community is. He's just one person, but that is truly something that astounded me when I was starting out. So don't hesitate to do that. And then onto the worksheet. This is something that I put in my book, but I'm just going to give it to you now. At the end, you can take a screenshot of the completed worksheet for you to get started with. So we're going to go through these 12 small areas. And by the end, if you fill this out, you would have a good idea of where you can get started engaging in your next science communication activity. So the first element we want to look at is the topic. It's very simple, and that's the entire purpose of this. What is the topic I want to talk about? This could be a topic within your research. It could be a current event. It could be another person's research, but that is what you would write down here. What are the key takeaways? And for this, I don't mean, for example, if you wrote your paper and you want to do something with that and you have the key takeaways of your research to the conclusions, that's not this. This is more like, okay, if by the end of this, people only get to remember one or two things, what would they be? That is what you would write down here. So what do you really want them to remember? So you can always refer back to that. And then the story. And I'm going to give you only one. Very simple advice for a story. It's that it has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And if you tick those three boxes for any communication you do, you will have been more professional than a lot of storytelling you see online sometimes. So let's move to the second part. And always, always, always the cornerstone of any great communication is thinking about your audience, your target audience. Who am I talking to? And then extending on that, what do they care about? So this doesn't necessarily already have to be related to your research or your topic as well, but something that you know that is something that people care about at this time. And then we will connect them, why they should care about your story, about the message that you're delivering. What is the connection between what you have to offer them as a story and what they already care about? And that is the reason that they will pay attention to you or to your communication. And if you can pinpoint that here, or at least start thinking about that already, that is a great way forward. Then the medium. In what format are you working and what is unique about that? What is specific about this medium that I'm using and how does it influence other elements of this frame? I'm going to give you two examples of this worksheet filled out so you'll be better able to understand what I mean with this in a minute. And then are there some skills that I still have to learn before I can do this? So this would be, is there training I have to follow? I have to give this very big presentation. I was invited to go speak somewhere, for example, but I just don't feel comfortable yet speaking in front of an audience. Maybe that's a skill for you to work on before you move forward. And then finally, there's time. And this is, once again, plan, plan, plan. Think about how much time you have to spend on this, when you have the time, and are there other tasks that I have to do? For example, if you give a presentation, it's building your story and then your slide deck. Maybe you have to get it validated by someone in the meanwhile. And then, of course, is there a deadline? You can screenshot this if you want to. I'm just going to give you like 10 seconds to do that. And then let's look at a filled out version of this.
Maybe I can quickly intervene and tell you all that we will make a replay of the talk available on YouTube as well. So if you didn't have time to screenshot it all, don't worry, you can just pause the video later on and I will send the link in the follow-up mail.
Of course, I forgot about that, but that is so much easier. Okay, so yeah, this is actually the talk that I'm giving to you right now, written down in this worksheet. So I'm not going to go over it in too much detail, but you can see here the topic was overcoming barriers. What I want you to remember is that you can make it manageable and that it's valuable to show your outcomes of science communication. You have my beginning, my middle, ending. Who's my audience? PhD students, but also communication professionals. What do you care about? This is, of course, an assumption now, but I assume that you care about your research, but also your relationship with your supervisor, your career goals, your time, spending it in a useful way. And knowing PhD students, I made an educated guess and said that you care about doing things right. What are your reasons for listening to me? Well, I am here to help. I love offering quick tools, and they are maybe not be that detailed yet, but they do give you a starting point. And then let's see, what I figured was unique is that you're all eating, but that you're all very eager to learn in the 1 hour you're going to spend here. But you don't all have a communication background, but you are interested. And then you see time, how much time I had to plan this and work on it. This is a specific example for a presentation for my research. This is a fictional one, but I'm going to show you the emphasis that I added. So what could be interesting to think about as a key takeaway, the most important one I wanted people to remember was always that production dedicates to the outcome through production practices. I did my PhD on television and entertainment studies, so let's not dive too deep into that. But with my care element, I said, well, not everyone works in the same framework that I do, so I may have to overcome that a little bit. That could be difficult. In my audience, I said, well, maybe there's a supervisor there whose work I engage with a lot, and maybe I want to make sure that I show the connection between our work. What is unique about a conference presentation, sometimes you are presenting at 8:15 on a Friday morning, the day after the conference party. So maybe you want to be a little bit more entertaining. So these are all ways that you can see that you can use this worksheet to really think about what you're doing. And I had it once again here. So what is the goal of this tool? It's a way to quickly jot down your first plans to keep in mind when you're setting up a science communication activity, whether it's writing a blog post, creating a reel, reaching out to a journalist. Organize your thoughts here and you'll feel you have something to start working on. Maybe before we move on to the second tool, are there questions about this? I saw like some raised hands, but I don't know.
Mystery sense, but somebody asked if whether you would be willing to share the worksheet as a PDF form, PDF file as well.
Yeah.
So we can arrange that after the
We can definitely arrange that. That is a very useful thing to do with this. Okay, let's make that happen. Okay, so the second tool, and this is something that you could use to overcome, if people are resistant to engaging in science communication. This is something that we actually use a lot in my job, and it's showing why we are doing things. It's a way to answer the why question of SciComm activity. What does it add to your project, to your research work, to your own professional development could also be a question here. But it's a way of connecting your activity to your goal and how that activity contributes to you reaching your goals. So that's really what we want to focus on with this part. So why do we care about added value? Because it helps us work towards our goals. It's with a certain level of focus and keeping track of the impact of our activities. It could be for yourself. If you're spending 84 hours preparing for a press release notice and nothing is coming out of it, and you want to better understand why, thinking about your added value could be useful. But also for others, maybe you spend 3 hours every week writing LinkedIn posts and creating TikToks, and your supervisor doesn't see why you're doing this, but you see that every week you get a lot of engagement on the content that you're making. showing the connection between those two could be a way to show them why it's useful that you're spending time on this. So we want to optimize the use of our time by linking our efforts to our outcomes. But we also want to keep track of what is working and what is not working and what we might want to change to make sure that the time that we're spending is actually adding value. It's a transferable skill to think about the value of your activities and how they help you reach certain goals. A strategic and organized approach will be useful throughout any job that you will do after your PhD, I promise. So this is a great way to already start getting your feet wet with that way of thinking. And it's a motivator. It's your drive to keep going. If you set goals for yourself and you can meet them, that is a great way to keep yourself motivated. So let's move on to the actual tool you can use. It's not a clear PDF proof format like the other one, but it's more like a range of questions. I'm not gonna show you an entire key performance indicator framework, but you also don't need that to get started. So what we're gonna do is compare the before science communication activity and the after. And before, we're gonna set goals, and those goals, I'm gonna challenge you to be a bit more specific than, well, I wanna have my PhD in 6 years. Think about the goals you wanna reach in your work as a researcher. And that could be as big as like, I wanna have a postdoc opportunity set up by the time I'm done. And then you can really start thinking about, okay, what smaller things do I have to achieve to make that happen? And then you're also going to make very specific goals for your science communication work. And that could be as small as the next LinkedIn post I write, I want that one to have 800 impressions. And that's what I'm going to be working on. And then if I don't make that, I have a reason to start thinking about, what was it? What can I change here? Was my content not engaging enough? Was I not using the right language? Was I too specific? Is my audience not big? So, you know, that's a way to really start thinking about it in a strategic way. And then after, we're going to start very simple. Did you reach your goal? If you did, of course, you also want to answer the following questions. But if you didn't, that is perfectly okay, because we're still going to answer the other 4 questions. How much time did you actually spend on it? Maybe you didn't reach your goal and your press release, your research wasn't picked up by the general audience, but you also only spent 10 minutes on it. Then maybe you know what went wrong and what could be improved. And then you can think, oh, what did I learn? Well, I learned that I had to spend a little bit more time on that. So it could also be something else. Maybe what I learned was creating reel. What I learned was I don't like working with TikTok. That is not going to be a medium for me. That's all these answers are perfectly fine, because you're still growing as a professional here. How many people did I reach, interact? Even if that wasn't your goal, it's still very valuable to think about this, because imagine if your supervisor is challenging you. Why are you spending time on threads? Why are you creating LinkedIn posts? Well, every time I do, 3,000 people interact with it. That could be a way to convince them of the value, because you're creating visibility for the research, for the department, for the university. So that's really about knowing what to appeal to. Or maybe I was just very happy while I was doing this, and that motivated me to do my research work. And then another challenge to think about is what happened after the activity. Because you'll see, if you really start to engage with science communication more often, that it will find you somehow. You'll get invited to start speaking. People will ask you to contribute. So maybe that one threads post that you sent out, or maybe that one press release didn't really create a lot of buzz, but all of a sudden there's another researcher in your inbox emailing you to invite them to give a guest lecture, because of that, they now know that you are the expert in a certain area. So those are the types of things you're really going to be creating for yourself. And I really want to challenge you to use SciComm as a way for networking as well. Honestly, it's a great tool for that too. So again, if you have a supervisor that doesn't see the added value yet, try appealing to those perspectives as well. I'm getting ready to round up, but I want to see again if there's questions at this time.
Not by now, so please
Okay.
feel free to still.
Yeah, I have 3 more slides. But first, before I once again say what I hope you take away from this, I would want to ask you to write down what you will take away from this talk. You could do this in the chat, you could do it for yourself on paper or on your computer, it doesn't really matter, but just take like, I don't know, half a minute to a minute to think about, what do I actually remember from the last 45 minutes? Is there something that's stuck in my head? Something very unclear to me still? So you can just do that now, and then I'll come back to you shortly.
I can see the answers that are coming in, because I'm not sure that everybody can see the other ones. The first one is, I think, very spot on, or immediately plan, as you said.
That means I did my job.
So feel free to share if you want to inspire other people, but don't feel obliged to do so.
Exactly. It's this is more, it's for you. You're spending your lunchtime with this, just a small moment of reflection of like, did I actually take something away from this or not? And I'll continue now with, in a nutshell, make it manageable, and making things manageable is by planning, even if it's small things. Like I said, the example of writing 1 tweet every day. I'm going to spend a max of 5 minutes on it. I'm going to put a reminder in my schedule, and this is how I will get started. Or 1 day every month, 1 week every half a year, 1 course every year. Think about how this will work for you and plan accordingly. And if you feel that need, talk about it with your supervisor. I hope I gave you some ways to convince them, mostly by thinking about the added value. If you can connect a talk you did with a very concrete research output opportunity that you had, that is often gold to convince them that it was very useful for you to do this. Appeal to visibility for research. So yeah, those are the 2 things I hope that I inspire you to think about today. And if you did like this talk, if you like this approach to thinking about your research or activities throughout your research, you can order my book. If you use the code DOCTOR, you'll get 10% off of the book if you order it through this thing. The link will also be in the YouTube video. Don't feel obliged to do this, but I do think it's a lot of fun. But I am biased. So let's move on and see if you have any more questions for me today.
Of course, I was muted. I just wanted to share a beautiful thing someone said, that even as a starting PhD student, I have something to share. That's one of the takeaway messages, and I think that's really nice to hear.
Yeah.
Somebody asks, what is your experience with AI for science communication?
Well, the thing is, I was a science communicator before AI. Right now, in my work, because of course I'm still communicating about my research internally and with stakeholders that also sometimes need a lot of convincing, I mostly use tools like ChatGPT for outlines, actually. I explain to ChatGPT, I give them a role. I say, you are my expert at science communication. I have a new research. I want to talk about it within the organization. These are my stakeholders. These are friendly stakeholders. These are people that still need some convincing. And then I give them a short story about what I want to talk about. And I mostly ask it to create my outline, and then I critique it myself, or I workshop it together with ChatGPT. So that is mostly how I am using it right now. What I don't use at this time, but I do see the value of, is using it to create visuals. But I'm still a bit on the fence on the ethics of using AI generators for visuals. So that's why I'm not always engaging with that. And I am, of course, also lucky that I'm working with an organization that has a lot of visual content for us available, and a style guide that we can use. But if you don't have that, I would certainly think about how you can use that. Maybe there's video content as well right now that you can create with it. So that could be a fun tool as well. If you want, I can dive in. I have a lot of colleagues that I can ask that know the very specific tools that you can use for each of those. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, but I also think that we have a lot of great skilled visual artists in Belgium that also deserve our support if we can work with them.
I just want to add that to the person you talked about before, Ben Verhoeven. I shared his details in the chat, by the way.
Perfect.
He's giving a workshop at our SciComm Academy on AI for science communication. So if you're interested, you can also check it out. And then you have a win-win. You have the talk with Ben and you get some nice content creation here.
All right.
Somebody just said that the schemes you shared were very helpful. So I just wanted to say that. But further, I don't see any additional questions. I think everything was already very clear, and you gave a lot of useful tools to everyone to get started, hopefully, or at least inspire them to think about getting started or plan on getting started. So I also want to thank you, Anouk, for being here and for sharing your experience with us.
All right, you're very welcome. I had a lot of fun preparing this. I hope it was useful. Again, if not, let me know. It's always great to learn.